hundreds of them. They wriggled and writhed out of every exposed orifice. Spindly white noodle-like creatures grappled aimlessly at the air, treating my patient's body like their own personal playground. I sighed, stepping back from the operating table. That was supposed to be a routine appendectomy. I wearily turned to my colleagues. They all wore horrified expressions on their faces. Time of death, 10:14 a.m. Allison, contact the bio team, please. The rest of you, don't leave this room. We need to await further instruction. In a matter of minutes, we were surrounded by figures shrouded in bright yellow hazmat suits. They shoved the corpse into a body bag and went to work meticulously dousing the room in chemicals. Hey, Doc. I was hoping I wouldn't have to see your ugly mug for a while, a man wearing a white biosuit said, handing me one to match. The feeling is mutual, Bill. Third time this week. Any idea where people are picking these little bastards up from yet? Not that I've heard of. Then again, the top brass doesn't tell me anything. Sounds about right, I murmured, exposing my back to him so he could zip me up. He hurriedly did so. Ready whenever you are, I said, my arms extended at my sides. Bill scooped up a black spray bottle and began slathering me with a light green disinfectant. I always thought the stuff looked like toxic waste. Sure hope they manage to find the source of these things soon. You're telling. Bill was cut short by a deafening shriek. I instantly whipped my head in its direction. It was Allison. Even through the thick plastic of her hazmat suit, I could make out a sea of worms flowing from her nose and ears. A handful of them had managed to burrow through her eyelids, inching down her bloody face in droves. She clawed desperately at the tiny creatures, but it did little good. The worms just kept coming. I turned away, choking down the bile that was creeping up my throat. Before I could compose myself, I heard a loud thump. Allison had collapsed, her body convulsing violently on the ground. Bill shot me a look and pursed his lips. Looks like you're gonna have to find a new scrub nurse. I solemnly shook my head. Yeah, I was really starting to like this one too. As the bodies were wheeled out of the operating room, it finally clicked. In case of an infection, they didn't make my team wear hazmat suits to keep the parasites out. No, they made us wear them to keep those things in.
All right, that should just about sum it up. You got it from here. Yep, not my first all-nighter, I said, raising my coffee mug. Great. Keenan will be here to relieve you in the morning. Call me if you need anything. I flashed Mike a thumbs up as he turned to leave. Oh, and Jeremy. He paused, his back still facing me. Whatever you do, do not disturb the mannequins. I couldn't explain why, but a shiver rippled through me as soon as the words left his lips. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Okay, got it, good. Best of luck to you, kid. He whistled to himself as he departed, the noise growing more distant as he sauntered down the hall. And then I was alone. Left to my own devices for a whole 8 hours, I leaned back in my swivel chair, surveying the monitors one last time before pulling out my phone. Get paid to listen to music and read scary stories all night. Count me in. Nothing happens in an empty mall after closing, right? Wrong. As I plopped down in my seat, third cup of coffee in hand, I caught movement out of my periphery. I groaned. Of course. My first night on my own, and some stupid teenagers had probably broken in. Well, I was right. Camera 5 showed 2 teen boys and a girl, dressed from head to toe in black, creeping down the empty hallways. I scoffed. What were they even looking for? All the stores were locked up tight. I leapt to my feet. I knew their exact location. I could cut them off if I was quick enough. I bolted down the desolate corridors, past rows upon rows of vacant brick and mortar outlets. A chill undulated through me as I ran. The place looked different at night. It felt like I shouldn't be there, like something sinister lurked around every corner, between every nook and cranny, waiting for the perfect opportunity to pounce. I attempted to steady my breathing as I reached the staircase. There they were. If those little thugs thought they could get past me, they had another thing coming. I tiptoed behind them, quiet as a church mouse, accidentally eavesdropping on their conversation. Hey, I might not be the most upstanding guy out there, but I don't meddle if I don't have to. How much further, Marcus? This place gives me the creeps, the girl said, her eyes darting anxiously from side to side. Should just be up here on the right, the shortest of the boys responded. Cool. Everyone remember the plan. Marcus and the girl nodded. Okay, let's just go over it again, to be sure we have it right. Yeah, no. Nate, you forgot it, didn't you? You've always had a horrible memory. The girl teased, earning her a spiteful glare. Oh, shut up, Laney. You're only here because Marcus has a crush on you. Even in the dim moonlight, I could see that both of their cheeks were blossoming with color. It filled my heart with a strange sort of nostalgia. And honestly, it almost made me forget why I was there. Almost. That's not true, okay? Just tell me what you think the plan is already. Marcus huffed, staring at his feet. Fine. But just for the record, I know you're lying. So, you two lovebirds go find your brother while I run this way and set off an alarm to distract that idiot security guard. Then, hey, who are you calling an idiot? I clasped Nate and Marcus by the shoulders and spun them around. The terrified expressions painted on their faces sent a smug grin inching across my lips. Suddenly, white-hot pain streaked through my cheek. I was seeing stars. One of those little brats had sucker-punched me. Without a word, they darted away, leaving me rubbing my throbbing face. I quickly regained my composure and shot after them. I didn't know what I was going to do when I caught up to those three, but I did know that they were never going to set foot in that mall again, if I had anything to do with it. We all sprinted like Olympic athletes. I was fueled by rage. As for them, fear. I was rapidly gaining on them. 10 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet. I was almost able to reach out and grab them. Then, we came to an intersection. Without hesitation, Nate and Laney took a left while Marcus swerved right. I had a split-second decision to make. Ultimately, I reached the conclusion that 2 was better than 1, and I hung a left. I smirked to myself. As I again began to close the gap, I knew that hallway. It led to a dead end. Give up now, kids. I'm feeling generous. If you throw in the towel, I'll let you walk out of here scot-free. It was an obvious lie, but I had to try something. The quicker I got them out of there, the better. They didn't respond. In fact, I think they managed to pick up the pace, but they wouldn't be able to hold out forever, and they knew it. Nate and Laney glanced at each other knowingly as the three of us skidded to a halt. And again, they split up, trying to zip past me. For the second time, that night I had a choice. Tricky little bastards, I muttered, opting to go after Nate. I cut him off, grabbing his arm. Gotcha. You're coming with me, I said, dragging him by the collar. Ow, you don't have to be so rough. I chuckled wryly. Don't have to be so rough, huh? I wish you had been thinking that when you gave me this, I snarled, pointing to the dark purple bruise blossoming on my cheek. Okay, point taken. Just loosen up a little bit, all right? I reluctantly obliged, still maintaining a firm grip on his shirt. I paused, looking him in the eye. All right, kid. I know you're just some stupid teenagers who got in way over their heads. I'll consider leaving the police out of this if you take me to your friends. A spark of fear flashed across his pupils. He mulled it over, before begrudgingly meeting my gaze. Fine. I didn't want to come here anyway. We need to go to the food court first. As we came into view of the dining area, I couldn't help but shiver. Everything looked so barren at night. Whereas in the day, the food court would have been bustling with customers. It was now eerily quiet. Nate led us straight there. The sign loomed ominously above us, casting an unsettlingly dark shadow on the tiled flooring below. Why are we here? Hate to break it to you, but there's no one on duty to cook your orange chicken and lo mein. Nate scowled at me before calling out into the darkness. Laney, you can come out now. A pair of blue eyes peeked up at us before hurriedly ducking back behind the counter. Not with him out there. Laney, it's okay. He said he won't call the cops on us. We'll be fine. She timidly rose, blonde curls bouncing atop her shoulders. Are you sure? A twinge of annoyance percolated Nate's features. Come on, you know I'm not a liar. Just get out here. Laney hesitantly shuffled over to us, staring at the ground. Fine. Let's get Marcus and go home. I don't like this place. Lead the way, I said, extending a hand. They shot me a collective glare before obeying. We walked in silence, past vacant stands and shops. I couldn't bring myself to look inside the windows. I glanced down at Nate. I'd forgotten that I still had an iron grip on his collar. If I let go of you, are you gonna run? No. We're already caught. What's the point? I released him, and he adjusted his shirt. I stuffed my hands in my pockets and slowly mustered up the courage to ask the question that had been burning away at my conscience since I'd first encountered the trio. So, why did you three come here? I can tell that you're not bad kids. You're here for a reason. The pair shot each other a stern glance. Laney nodded. Nate sighed, then spoke. Marcus has a brother who used to work here. He went missing a few months ago. They say he stayed too late one night, that they got him. There's rumors about this place, you know, about the Mannequins. He shivered before continuing. Well, Marcus's brother, Max, had obviously heard them. He was skeptical, so he decided to find out firsthand if they were true. They say that the Mannequins come to life after midnight, that if you get unlucky enough to come face to face with them when they do, they'll claim you as one of their own. My heart pounded against my rib cage like a jackhammer. If Nate was spinning a story, he sure was doing a good job. So what? You think your friend's brother is a mannequin? That's just about the most insane thing I've ever heard. Look, I didn't say that I believe it. Okay, Marcus dragged us here so he could try to talk to his brother again. Well, he dragged me here. She came on her own, Nate smirked. Laney blushed, twirling a blonde lock of hair between her fingers. I did not. You did too. You butted into our conversation at school the other day. I know you just wanted some alone time with Marcus because you like him, Nate said, making a smoochy face. That's enough, you two. This is it, right? The three of us stood there, gaping at the faded sign overhead. A sense of trepidation crawled up my spine. I never thought I'd see the day where I was so apprehensive to walk into a clothing store, but there I was. My gaze shifted to the metal gate, closing off the shop from the rest of the outlet. It was cracked open. How'd he get in there? I muttered. Something told me that I shouldn't speak too loudly. The key was with Max's stuff. They gave it to Marcus's family. I nodded. That checked out. Well, I guess you two should wait out. A deafening shriek emanated from the bowels of the darkness before me, sending fear coursing through my veins like venom. Stay here. I didn't have to tell them twice. I squeezed through the gap in the fencing, sweat pooling above my brow. I don't know what I expected to find, but it definitely wasn't that. I darted between clothing racks, desperately searching for the source of the terrified wail. It didn't take me long to find it. I froze, struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Marcus was being dragged along the floor by an army of stark white figures. The mannequins were moving, all by themselves. Their limbs creaked as they walked, those emotionless polystyrene faces sending my heart into overdrive. No, this couldn't be real, but it was. And I had to do something. Please. I know you're still in there. Don't do this. I love you, Max. Please. Marcus's shrill cries shattered my heart. He only wanted to see his brother again. And unfortunately for him, his wish came true. They didn't react. I squinted, tracing their trajectory. They were taking Marcus to the storage room. I had to stop them. Hey, put him down, you freaks. I cringed at how brittle the words came out. Their heads whipped toward me. Two of them were cocked to the side like curious dogs. They were studying me, sizing me up. Marcus's eyes shimmered with hope. I'm warning you. Put him down, I shouted, brandishing my flashlight. I was seriously regretting leaving my personal taser at home. They stared at me blankly for a tense moment before the lead mannequin pointed a plastic finger at me. I was paralyzed with fear as two of the monstrosities charged toward me at an inhuman speed. I failed to will my legs to move in time. The pair crashed into me, sending us sprawling to the floor. No, leave him alone, Marcus yelled. To no avail. The mannequins wrapped their rigid fingers around my arms, effectively immobilizing me. I thrashed and flailed, but they were ridiculously strong. They effortlessly picked me up, carrying me to the entrance. I was forced to watch as Marcus and I grew further and further apart, his panicked whimpers fading into the distance. I suddenly found myself sitting outside of the store, staring up at the ghostly white figures lurking among the inky black. One of the mannequins slammed the gate shut. My heart plummeted into my stomach as I heard the lock click into place. Without a word, they disappeared back into the depths of the shop. Nate rushed over to me, grabbing a fistful of my shirt. What happened, man? Where's Marcus? Tears began to blur my vision. I'd failed them. He's gone. Laney spoke up, startling me. No, there has to be something we can do. I mean, maybe we could call the police. Or, I don't know, anything. We can't just leave him here. She cried, unable to contain her tears any longer. Nate let me go, placing a hand on her shoulder. She's right. There's got to be something we can do, he said with fire brimming in his piercing green irises. I solemnly shook my head. No, you saw those things. I promise you, I will do everything in my power to get your friend back. In the meantime, I need you two to leave. Go home. No. We. Look at me, I said, locking eyes with Nate. The best thing that you can do to help Marcus right now is to get yourselves out of here. I'll do what I can, okay? He averted his gaze, staring holes into his feet. Okay. We're depending on you. All of us. Let's go, Laney. Laney, he said, his cold visage silencing her. Fine. But we'll be back, she said, wiping her wet cheeks. I sighed, pulling out my phone as the teens dejectedly shuffled away. Hey, Mike. Yeah, it's Jeremy. What's wrong, kid? Didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Mike, there's been an incident. Some teenagers snuck in, and the mannequins, they took one. Damn. Okay, I'll tell Keenan that I'm taking his shift tomorrow. Lock yourself in the office. I don't think I need to tell you this, but do not come out until morning. Got it? Yeah. See you soon? I spent the remainder of my shift on pins and needles, meticulously scanning the cameras. Every so often, I could see a flash of white streak across one of the store windows. Morning couldn't come soon enough. Mike trudged through the door an hour before opening. He stoically met my gaze before turning around. Come on. I led him back in silence. Golden sunlight glinted off the metal as Mike unlocked the gate. How many were there? 5. Dread seeped into my bones as we passed several of the motionless statues. Now that I really had a chance to drink in their features, the mannequins looked strangely detailed. A slender man with long, wavy hair, a portly woman with an afro, a muscular, hulking figure with bulging veins. I've counted 5 so far, Mike said as we continued on. Me too. As we made our way to the back of the store, my breath caught in my throat. There stood a small white mannequin. Its mouth was open in a permanent scream, and its frozen fingers clawed at its cheeks. If you're reading this, stay far away from the mall at night. Because if you're not careful, you just might add another mannequin to its collection.
Mikey, I'm not doing this. It's too dangerous, I said, stamping my foot in the thin layer of snow coating the frozen ground beneath us. Oh, quit being such a wuss. We'll be fine, he proclaimed, tugging my arm. No, Mikey, stop it, I wailed, collapsing to the ground dramatically. I knew he wouldn't keep trying to drag my dead weight. Fine, if you won't go with me, I'll just have to do it by myself. He released his grasp and shuffled to the ice. My heart pounded like a jackhammer in my tiny chest. Mikey, please, you're going to get hurt, I cried, tears beginning to blur my vision. Caleb, shut up. I'm trying to concentrate, he retorted, calculating each footfall with a precision that my 6-year-old mind couldn't comprehend. I held my breath, anxiously anticipating the tragedy that I feared would come. Mikey continued to scoot across the frozen lake, oblivious to the danger he was in. A few tense seconds later, and he'd reached the midway point. See, Caleb? You were being a big crybaby for nothing. Crack! A massive fracture erupted below Mikey's feet, spiderwebbing across the glassy surface on which he stood. My brother's face drained of color as the consequence of his blunder crashed down on him like a ton of bricks. The ice groaned beneath his weight. Mikey didn't have much time. Don't move! I'm going to get Grandpa, I said, praying that I would make it back in time. Hurry, please, Mikey whispered through clenched teeth, his hazel eyes pleading with me to keep my word. I turned to the house. It was only a few yards away. I could make it if I... Splash! The thin layer of ice separating Mikey and the frigid waters below gave way, plunging him into the wintry depths. Help! Help! He wailed, thrashing wildly as I sprinted to the house. I ran as fast as my little legs would carry me. By the time I made it inside, I was wheezing and sputtering nonsense. Grandpa, Mikey, ice, fell, drowning, I cried, pointing out the window into the lake, where Mikey was visible flailing his arms, desperate to escape his frozen prison. Grandpa instantly understood. He leapt from his armchair and bolted to the shed. He returned moments later with a long bundle of rope. He brushed past me, running quicker than I knew a man his age was capable. Once we reached Mikey, he was still floundering, struggling to keep his head above water. Mike, can you still feel your fingers? Grandpa shouted. His presence calmed my brother somewhat as his convulsive, erratic motions began to subside. Yeah, Mikey said, teeth chattering. Good. I need you to take this rope and tie it around yourself. I'm going to hoist you out. Mikey nodded as Grandpa tossed the line into the freezing water next to him. Mikey hurriedly obeyed, fastening a knot around his torso. Hold on tight, boy. Just as Grandpa was about to heave, Mikey suddenly disappeared into the murky depths. The line was being gulped into the water at a sickening rate. I turned to my grandfather. The look of fear rooted in his visage is one that I hope I never witness again. The rope continued to disappear until it went tight in Grandpa's grip. He braced for the impact and held firm as the mysterious force dragged him a few feet closer to the water. My heart palpitated furiously as he slid, dread seeping into my bone. Grandpa pulled, summoning every ounce of strength remaining in his weary muscles. Eventually, he began to make progress. Inch by inch, Grandpa was winning the battle. And then, all at once, the line went slack, and Grandpa fell flat on his back. Something big burst from the hole, flopping onto the ice and sliding toward us. It was Mikey. His face was starting to turn blue and he wasn't breathing. Grandpa reeled him in the rest of the way. He began CPR, laying my brother on the sturdy, snow-covered ground and starting chest compressions. Blood thumped in my ears and tears began streaming down my rosy cheeks. I was certain that Mikey was dead. A few dozen abdominal thrusts later, and Mikey coughed up water, returning to life as he frantically gasped for air. Gradually, the color began to return to his face. I breathed a sigh of relief and threw my arms around his soaking body. "Don't ever do that again! I thought you died!" I sobbed, clutching him in a vice grip. He didn't return my embrace. Mikey, what I saw once I pulled away, chilled me to my core. My brother sat motionless, staring at me with wide, vacant eyes. He didn't so much as twitch from the cold. His dead, emotionless face sent panic rippling through me. "What's wrong with him, Grandpa?" "I don't know," he said as he scooped Mikey into a fireman's carry. "But we need to get him out of the elements. Once we get him out of the elements, once we get inside, I need you to dial 911, okay?" I nodded, diligently following behind him. The paramedics arrived shortly after I called. They treated Mikey for mild hypothermia on the way to the hospital. They needed to take him in to make sure his stint under the water hadn't done any permanent damage to his brain. I was a bundle of nerves the whole way to the emergency room. Grandpa had gone with Mikey in the ambulance, so I rode with Grandma to meet them. She reassured me the best she knew how, but it did little good. My mind was a jumbled mess of thoughts and emotions. Why didn't he just listen to me? What was he thinking? What was he thinking? What pulled him under for so long? And the one that really stuck with me, was this my fault? I should have tried harder to stop him. Guilt gnawed at me like piranhas devouring a slab of meat. I wasn't really to blame, was I? I tried to cram the notion to the furthest compartment of my brain as we pulled into the parking lot. We signed in at the front desk, and a few painstaking minutes later, we were reunited with Mikey and Grandpa. Mikey gazed at nothing in particular, his glassy eyes staring at the empty cream-colored wall. I tentatively approached him. I slowly reached toward him, terror stabbing through my chest like a butcher knife. Sweat pooled above my brow as my fingertips grazed his arm. Mikey suddenly snapped toward me, snatching my wrist with an intensity that no 9-year-old should possess. I froze in shock. Mikey's grip was ice cold, searing my skin with his touch. And those eyes, his pupils bore straight into mine. The loathing hatred behind them sent chills undulating down my spine. I was stuck there. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even look to my grandparents for help. The world melted away, leaving the two of us alone in a nauseating staring match. "Caleb? Caleb?" I was pulled back to reality by Grandpa's worried voice. He lightly shook my shoulders. "Oh, yeah. Sorry, Grandpa. I need you to scoot over, buddy. Dr. Kent here needs to run some tests on Mikey." I obliged, joining Grandma. I glanced at Mikey, failing to meet his gaze. He'd returned to fixating on nothing, staring straight ahead at that featureless, nondescript wall. After sufficiently poking and prodding my brother, the doctor returned to us. His physical reactions seemed normal enough. However, it does concern me that he isn't speaking or responding to stimuli. There may be some permanent damage, but we'll need to do a CAT scan to be sure. My grandparents grimly locked eyes. Grandpa nodded to Dr. Kent. "Okay, do it." Mikey had to stay in the ER until the early hours of the morning. All the while, he didn't utter so much as a cough. The medical staff performed a myriad of different tests on him, which seemingly all reached the same conclusion. My brother was fine. Finding nothing out of the ordinary, Mikey was discharged. Dr. Kent instructed Grandpa to take him to his personal physician if the odd behavior continued, and explained that there was nothing else he could do. He thanked him, and we left, tired and frustrated by the lack of results. We finally arrived home at 4 a.m, nodding off and ready for some much-needed rest. Well, everyone except for Mikey. That same fish-eyed expression was pasted on his face. I shuddered just looking at him. I was almost disappointed when the doctors didn't find anything. If they had, at least we'd know why Mikey was acting this way. Instead, we were left with no explanation, no signs of improvement, and no answers. I passed out the moment my head hit the pillow. My sleep-addled brain had been working in overdrive for the entire evening, and I was pooped. Grandma tucked me in, wishing me sweet dreams. As the door creaked shut and my vision faded to black, Mikey faced the wall opposite me in the fetal position. The thought that he might actually be getting some much-needed sleep comforted me, and I was lulled into a peaceful slumber. I awoke with a start in the middle of the night. My heart was racing and my pajamas were drenched in sweat. My eyes frantically darted from side as they adjusted to the darkness. I attempted to lift my arm, but I was frozen. I couldn't move a muscle. I panicked. I tried to kick, to flail, to scream, anything, but it was all futile. There was no doubt about it. I had sleep paralysis. Just when I was thinking that I should shut my eyes and try to nod off, I heard it, a shuffling noise from across the room. My blood turned to ice and I slowed my breathing, listening intently. I waited, my mind running wild with possibilities, and then I heard it again. But this time it was closer, much closer. Tears welled in the corners of my eyes as terror surged through me. Slowly, a shape began to emerge in my field of vision, a humanoid shape. Mikey's face gradually slid into view. He hovered inches above me, his wide, unblinking eyes staring hungrily at my motionless form. I could feel his hot, musty breath wafting into my nostrils as I staved off the urge to vomit. He stayed there for what felt like ages, immobile and unwavering, those cold, dead eyes boring into my psyche and rooting themselves in my nightmares. Out of nowhere, Mikey began to lean in closer until he was directly next to my ear. What he whispered still gives me chills to this day. "Please, help me. It wants my soul." Mikey then disappeared from view and scuttled back to his bed. My heart pounded so hard that I thought it was liable to leap from my chest at any given moment. What the hell was that? I lay in silent hysteria, as my still-developing brain struggled to comprehend what I had just seen. Somehow, I calmed myself enough to return to a fitful slumber. I awoke that morning hyperventilating. I think something has taken hold of Mikey, and I'm afraid that it wants to take me next. My eyes immediately shot to Mikey's bed. He was lying there, facing the wall in the same position he had adorned the night prior. Last night, was that all a nightmare? I didn't want to find out. All I wanted was to put as much distance between myself and Mikey as possible. I trudged into the kitchen, rubbing my eyes warily. The tantalizing aroma of eggs and bacon greeted my nostrils. I practically floated up to the counter where Grandpa sat, reading the paper and sipping his morning coffee. "How'd you sleep, kiddo?" he said, tousling my hair. "Good," I lied, hoping he wouldn't detect the deceit polluting my statement. As silly as it was, I didn't want Grandpa thinking I was a coward for having a bad dream. "How do you want your eggs, Caleb?" Grandma asked over the appetizing noise of sizzling bacon grease. "Scrambled, please. Coming right up. I sure hope your brother is feeling better." Grandpa paused mid-sentence. A chill crawled up my spine as the atmosphere of the room shifted. We all turned our attention to the doorway. There Mikey stood, still as a statue. The bug eyes plastered on his face were now bloodshot and marred with bulging spiderwebbing veins. He was staring straight at me. All the dread from the night before returned tenfold as I quickly averted my gaze. Hey buddy, you want some breakfast?" Grandpa said, coaxing him to join us. No response. Mikey wouldn't take his eyes off me. I didn't know what to do. We sat in tense silence, waiting for something to happen. "Okay, Mike, let's take a seat at the table," Grandpa said, hurriedly rushing him to a chair. Mikey's legs moved, but his eyes remained glued on me. I gulped, a dry lump working its way down my throat. Suddenly, I wasn't so hungry anymore. I have to go to the bathroom," I said, excusing myself from my spot. "Hurry back, Caleb. Your eggs are going to get cold," Grandma said. I nodded despondently and trudged to the bathroom, locking myself inside. I had to get away from Mikey, but how? I formulated a plot, ultimately deciding to play a twisted version of hide-and-seek with my brother. I was never an overly creative kid, and it was the best solution that my sleep-addled brain could conjure up. I crept out of the bathroom, returning to my family. Mikey's empty stare fell directly on me the moment I entered the room. "Thanks for breakfast, Grandma. I'm not really feeling hungry, though. Maybe you could give it to Mikey." Concern washed over her countenance, sending a pang of guilt streaking through me like a lightning bolt. What's wrong, sweetie? Are you not feeling well? Come join us at the table. Agnes, let the boy be, Grandpa said, shooting me a knowing look. He'll eat when he's ready. I mouthed a silent thank you as Grandma conceded. Okay, but it'll be here if you change your mind. I bolted to my room, desperate to escape Mikey's gaze. I hid there until he showed up, deadpan expression eating at my conscience. I ran, slamming Grandma and Grandpa's door shut and slipping under the bed. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway, slowly tracking me down. It took him a while, but eventually he found me. Those vacant eyes sent a shiver rippling through my body. I again darted away to a new spot. Things went on like that for the rest of the day. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little exhilarating. It was like a constant game of cat and mouse. Once nightfall came, I was exhausted. Hours of hiding from my brother had really taken a toll on me. I was ready to take a trip to Dreamland and forget about Mikey's weird behavior, just for a little while. Good night, boys. Sleep tight. Good night, Grandma, I said, rolling onto my side and promptly snoozing, Mikey staring at me all the while. I was jolted awake to a freezing sensation slashing into my cheek. Wind! I was outside. Why was I outside? I drearily opened my eyes, panic spiking through my chest like a spear once I realized where I was. I was met with a view of the stars and a labored dragging sound. It was me. I was being dragged through the snow. I started squirming, fighting to free myself from whoever or whatever had taken hold of me. I painstakingly rolled onto my stomach, and the culprit was revealed. It was Mikey, and he was taking me to the lake. I thrashed and convulsed in his grasp, battling tooth and nail to free myself to no avail. Mikey, or whatever had taken control of his body, was too strong. He tugged me by my shirt, effortlessly pulling me closer to the water's edge. My shirt. That was my salvation. I slipped it off just as we reached the ice coating the lake's surface. Mikey continued forward unfazed, as if he hadn't noticed the sudden lack of weight in his grip. I watched, tears threatening to spill down my cheeks, as Mikey carelessly made his way to the middle of the lake. Each reckless footfall sounded like a crashing meteorite. As he reached his destination, somehow completely unscathed, he turned to me. Those dead, bulging eyes connected with mine, and for the first time in a while, I was able to discern a genuine emotion behind them. Fear. Mikey lifted his foot and brought it down hard, cracking the ice. He raised it again, preparing to repeat the process. The ice was already brittle from where he'd fallen the first time. One more stomp and was done for. Mikey, please, don't do this, I wailed, pleading with whatever was in the driver's seat. A tear rolled down his cheek as his foot came crashing down, sending him plummeting into the frigid water. I waited, hoping to see my brother kick or flail or scream, but he didn't. Mikey never resurfaced. I flew back up to the house, sobbing my eyes out and waking my sleeping grandparents. Grandpa returned to the lake with the same bundle of rope from before. He searched the water with a flashlight while Grandma called the emergency services. Mikey was never found. He was declared missing on this day 18 years ago. I can't truly move on from his disappearance. He's been legally declared dead, but I know that he's still out there somewhere, because every year I make the 8-hour drive to visit my grandparents. In the winter, I return to the lake at night, free from prying eyes. Sometimes I swear I can see Mikey's blue, tumescent face peering back at me from beneath the ice. And now, he's always smiling.
I'll have a number 4 meal with extra cheese, 2 burgers with a large fry, 3 apple pies, and a shake. All right, Stan, your total comes out to $46.50. The land whale grunted approvingly as he shoved a greasy wad of crumpled bills into Gary's outstretched palm. Here's your change. I'll call your number when it's ready. Stan trundled away to await his late-night snack as Gary and I prepared the food. Geez, man, does he have a family waiting at home or something? I whispered as Gary shoveled fries into a red and yellow box. Blair, does that man look like he's got a wife and kids? Stan is one of our regulars. You'll see him pretty often if you stick with the night shift. I grimaced as I prepared the shake. Great. Lucky me. Hey, it could be a lot worse. Honestly, Stan is the least of your worries, he said as a shudder rippled through his body. We processed the remainder of the food in silence. Gary and I then shuffled to the counter, each donning a full tray. "Stan orders up," Gary exclaimed as the boulder of a man darted at an alarming speed to retrieve his sodium-rich smorgasbord. He snatched the trays from us, hurriedly ambling back to his corner table. I watched in astonishment as the man inhaled his meal. "Hey, could you help me sweep in the back? Best to do it now before any more customers." Gary was interrupted by an obnoxiously loud alarm blaring from his pocket. Stan looked up at him, glowering at the unwelcome ringing. "Sorry, gotta take this," he said, darting to the kitchen and out of view. He returned a moment later. All the color had drained from his face. He appeared sickly, like he'd suddenly caught a nasty case of the flu. That was my Aunt Norma. She said my parents were in a car wreck. Apparently my mom is in critical condition. He stared off into space, his brain slowly processing the tragic information it had just received. "Gary, I'm so sorry. Do you need me to call someone?" He snapped out of his trance, tears brimming in the corners of his eyes. He quickly wiped them away. "No, I'll be fine." "Okay, but with all due respect, what are you still doing here? Go be with your family, dude. I can handle closing up on my own." He locked eyes with me, a stern determination creeping over his countenance. "You're right. I need to go. Here, take my key to the restaurant. There's a list of rules in Dave's office. Go read them the first chance you get. You need to follow them to a T, no matter how ridiculous they sound. Got it? Yep, I'll take care of it. Now go," he said as Gary handed me a small silver object. He sprinted out the front door, letting it slam shut behind him. I fashioned Gary's drive-through headset below my hat and headed to the back to familiarize myself with the nighttime protocols. I laboriously pushed open the door to Dave's office. You'd think that thing was made from solid gold with how heavy it was. I surveyed my surroundings, my eyes immediately falling to the life-sized portrait beaming back at me. "Really, Dave? Even I'm not that self-absorbed," I muttered, continuing my search. I defaulted to the pockmarked bulletin board to my right. There they were, posted clear as day. I swiftly scanned over them. Rules for the night shift. 1. You are allowed a 7-minute grace period. No exceptions. 2. If a hooded figure knocks at the drive-through window, do not answer it. Stay out of its direct line of sight and it will leave. 3. If Stan claims that you forgot his pickles, offer him a free complimentary chocolate shake. If he refuses, lock yourself in the office and call Dave. 4. No outside food or drink. 5. If a blood-like substance begins seeping from under the grill, mop it up until it stops. No, it is not blood. 6. An old woman in a shawl will come in exactly 10 minutes past 1. Avoid looking at her for too long. She will not leave until you ask her where Tony is. 7. If a small child appears telling you he lost his mother, ignore him. He does not have good intentions. 8. You are required to comply with the employee dress code. Speak to management if you need clarification on what is acceptable. 9. If you are alone and you feel the undeniable sensation of being watched, lock yourself in the office immediately and wait for it to dissipate. 10. The store closes at 2 a.m. before you clock out. Place 2 packages of raw burgers on the stove. 11. Always leave the restaurant by 2:37 a.m. The Hamburglar doesn't like company. 12. Failure to adhere to these rules will result in immediate termination. Do not hesitate to call Dave if you have any questions or concerns. Dave's phone number was hastily scrawled at the bottom of the page. I stared at the list, unsure of what to make of it. Was this some sort of cruel prank on the newbie? Maybe Gary was in on it? I resolved to wait and find out for myself, and I made my way back to the counter. Upon seeing me approach, Stan rapidly stood from his seat and sidled up to me. "Can I help you with something?" "Yeah, you forgot my pickles." I mentally rolled my eyes. Gary hadn't been gone for 10 minutes, and the fun was already ramping up. "Look, I watched my coworker make those. I know he didn't." I began before Rule 3 crept into my head. I'm sorry, I can offer you a free shake for the inconvenience." His 4 chins flapped as he fervently shook his head. "No, I don't want any more food. There is another way you could make it up to me, though." A malicious grin inched across his face. A blanket of fear sent adrenaline bursting through my veins. I'm 16, sir. If you really think that's not what I meant, you dumb broad, I want a refund. What? No, you already ate it all. Fine, if you won't give me my money back, I'll have to take it from you. The massive mound of flesh began waddling to meet me behind the counter. I fled to the back, praying he wouldn't catch me. I glanced behind me as I struggled to push open the absurdly heavy office door. Stan was barreling toward me, sending shelves of product crashing to the ground. My heart thumped against my ribcage so hard that it hurt. I had just managed to slip through the door and slam it shut when he reached it. Thud. He pounded his ape-like fists against the sturdy metal frame, shouting obscenities at me all the while. I'll get you, you little whore. You can't stay in there forever. He was right. I instantly ripped the yellowing piece of paper from the board and punched in Dave's number. He picked up after an agonizingly long minute of waiting. Hello? This had better be good. I value my beauty sleep. Dave, it's Stan. The free shake didn't work. I'm trapped in the office. Dave sighed. All right, put it on speaker and hold your phone up to the door so he can hear me. I obliged, clenching my cracked smartphone with a vice grip and sticking it close to the rattling door. Stan, can you hear me? It's Dave. The room fell eerily silent. Oh yeah, what's up, Davey? Stan, are you harassing one of my employees again? I don't need to get Mrs. Barrett on the phone, do I? No, please. I'll behave, I swear. Please, just don't call her. His voice trembled as he spoke. I don't know. That's what you said the last time. I promise I'll never bother her again. Come on, Davey, show a little compassion. Dave took a moment to respond. All right, but I need you to go home and you need to apologize to Mrs. Blake for scaring her. Blair, I interjected, facepalming myself. Right. Apologize to Blair and I'll let you off the hook. Oh, thank you. Sorry, Blaze. So, can I take you up on that free shake? No, Stan. No free shake tonight. I need you to leave, Dave said, a stern finality in his statement. Without another word, Stan angrily tromped through the kitchen and out the front door. I didn't release my breath until I heard it shut behind him. Thanks, Dave. Anytime, kid. In my experience, threatening to call his mother is a decent deterrent for any overgrown man-baby. I chuckled, sensing the tension disperse. I'm gonna get back to bed now. Good luck tonight. And with that, he abruptly hung up. I sat for a moment, controlling my breathing in order to steady my palpitating heart before returning to my duties. I trudged into the kitchen and begrudgingly got to work cleaning the mess of boxes and condiments that Stan had strewn throughout the area. I had just put the final ketchup bottle in its place when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure was standing at the drive-through window. I immediately tensed up, every muscle in my body freezing in place. It glared at me, yellow glowing eyes piercing the darkness. It raised a gloved fist and knocked lightly on the thin glass. The sound freed me from my stupor. Rule 2. I dashed to the counter and crouched behind it, hugging my knees to my chest. Ice flooded my veins as the knocking grew louder. The window shook in its frame as the light knock soon escalated to rapid pounding. I squeezed my eyes shut, terrified at the notion that the slim barrier to the outside world wouldn't hold. The constant noise assaulted my eardrums, crashing against them like thunder during a storm. The knocking crescendoed into a fever pitch of resounding slams. Just when I thought that I might lose my sanity, it stopped. I glanced up in the midst of the unsettling silence I found myself in. It was gone, as if the entity had never appeared in the first place. I gradually stood and took my time getting my bearings. I hesitantly peeked around the corner at the drive-thru. Nothing. Not so much as a scratch on the glass. I glanced down at my phone. 12:15 a.m., less than 2 hours. I could handle it, right? I began sweeping like Gary was beginning to ask me to do prior to receiving his unfortunate news. I was thankful for a break in the action. I didn't know how much more I could take. Apparently, I could take a lot more, as I came to find out. A couple of college kids stumbled in, trying to hide the fact that they were obviously stoned out of their minds, and retrieved a pickup order. I watched as they clumsily staggered out the door. One of them held it politely for a small old lady, an old lady wearing a shawl. She didn't utter so much as a thank you, lining up to the register with purpose. I was exhausted, up well past my normal operating hours, so I had completely forgotten about the rules. Big mistake. The woman glowered up at me, face obscured from view. Her head covering was black as well as the rest of her outfit. Not unlike a ninja you'd see in a movie, the aura she radiated frightened me, but not enough to release me from my sleepy haze. "Hello, how can I help you?" I yawned, lazily covering my mouth. The woman didn't move a muscle. She scowled at me, yellow reptilian eyes piercing my psyche and sending my heart into overdrive. "Ma'am, would you like to order something?" Nothing. The longer we continued our staring match, the more sedated I felt, and not just due to the lack of sleep. She had some sort of strange pull over me. I nearly nodded off, my mind wandering back to the instructions. Before I passed out, I murmured, "Where's Tony?" Suddenly, I was released from my trance, and the woman was nowhere to be found, like she had simply vanished into thin air. My eyes widened. That was close, too close. I trudged to the sink and splashed some cool water in my face, then poured myself a large cup of coffee. I knew it would probably keep me up well past closing, but hey, if it helped me avoid another incident like that, I was all for it. I had just finished dumping the dustpan into the trash when I felt it. A peculiar sensation crept over me like bugs crawling on the back of my neck. I was being watched, but from where? I sensed it coming from the drive-thru. I whipped my head in its direction. Empty. It shifted to the dining area. No one was there. I grew lightheaded and panic began to surge through my system. A breeze swept past my ear, and I swear I could hear a soft, almost imperceptible voice whisper, "Blair." I bolted to the office, slamming the door shut as quickly as I could. What was that? I paced around the office like a caged animal, anxiously waiting for something, anything to happen. After what felt like an eternity, it began to dissipate without incident. I sat there for a moment, contemplating if this was really the right career path for me. Was every night like this? I was snapped back to reality by static emanating from my headset. I ripped it off until the noise stopped. A bumbling male voice crackled through it. "Hey, is this place open?" He slurred, obviously under the influence. "Yeah, what do you want to order?" I was beginning to lose my cool. Between all the strange occurrences and the inebriated customers, my patience was wearing thin. "I'll have a filet of fish meal." Coming right up. I made my way back to the kitchen and began preparing his order. Who the hell comes to a diner at 1:30 in the morning for a freaking filet of fish? I grumbled, purposely dousing his sandwich in sauce. I served the man, hoping to be rid of him as soon as possible. "Thanks." "Hey, is that a kid at the counter?" I turned my head and sure enough, there he was. A mess of blonde tangles and deep blue eyes peered at me from the register. I sighed. "Yeah, I'll take care of him. Have a good night." A child, unaccompanied in my restaurant, just what I needed. I began to approach the counter when Rule 7 blared in my mind like a tornado siren. I froze mid-stride. "Just ignore him, Blair." "It's almost 2. You got this," I reassured myself, starting my closing duties early. That was easier said than done. The child began wailing, shrill, high-pitched screams reverberating off the walls. He ran into the kitchen area, allowing me a full view of his tiny frame. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. His Pac-Man t-shirt looked well outdated, and he was filthy as if he hadn't showered in years. He began tugging on my shirt, begging for attention. "Please help me, lady. I can't find my mommy," he cried, tears streaming down his rosy cheeks. He was relentlessly pulling at my clothing. That was it. I'd reached my breaking point. If this child monster demon, whatever he was, planned on killing me, he could go ahead and put me out of my misery. I was done. "Get out! Just screw off and leave me the hell alone." He immediately quit sniffling and straightened up as if I'd flipped a switch. Red tinged his striking pupils. Dread began sinking into my gut. A malicious grin blossomed across his lips. "You made the right choice," he growled as he headed toward the exit. "Beardo kid," I mumbled, returning to cleaning. I finished up and waited around for 2 to hit, praying for a quiet, uneventful end to my first nightmare closing shift. Of course, my prayers went unanswered. I had a mere 3 minutes until I was supposed to clock out when I spotted it. A dark red viscous liquid oozing from beneath the stove. Great. Awesome. Just what I needed. I filled up a mop bucket in the storage closet and began sopping up the mystery fluid. If it wasn't blood, you could have fooled me. A persistent copper taste assaulted my tongue every time I opened my mouth. I gagged, forcing vomit back down my throat. The stuff just wouldn't stop coming. On my third bucketful of sloshing crimson, I finally started gaining an upper hand. I mopped fervently as blisters erupted across my hands from the friction of the wooden handle. All the not blood had been disposed of. I breathed a sigh of relief, careful to avoid splashing myself as I dumped the last of it down the drain. I'd done it! Take that! I win! I cheered as if I'd just claimed first prize at the Indy 500. My celebration was short-lived once I glanced down at my phone. 2:35 a.m. I bolted to the freezer, scooping up a couple bags of frozen patties. I slashed them open as quickly as I could, hoping in vain that I'd be able to make it out in time. I dumped their contents on the grill, then turned to toss the packaging in the trash. My heart plummeted into my gut. A man stood before me. His black dead eyes matched that of the small mask encompassing the top half of his face. Wispy red hair sprouted from his floppy hat. A matching tattered black and white striped uniform framed his features, accompanied by a dingy red tie dotted with images of burgers. He grinned at me, jagged rotten teeth sending a chill undulating through my entire body. He spoke, a rough, gravelly voice shattering the tense silence. Look, I know you're new here, so I'll spare you this time. But if I ever catch you in here this late again, I won't think twice about increasing my calorie intake. His wicked smile exuded a malevolent hunger that still haunts my nightmares. A wet gray tongue wormed its way around his cracked, withered lips. I felt like a mouse about to be devoured by a rattlesnake. He scowled at me. What are you still doing here? Get out. I suddenly regained my mobility. I tore through the dining area and burst into the cool night air. The Hamburglar's soulless stare followed me into the vacant parking lot. I hurriedly locked him inside and raced to my car as a torrent of emotions flooded through me at once. Fear, anger, and confusion were all prominent on my desolate drive home. In the end, rage won out. I wasn't scheduled the next day, but I was determined to make that smug prick in charge at least give me some sort of explanation. I returned to the diner around 4 hours later, running on zero sleep and a whole pot of coffee. With fire in my eyes, I flung the door open and marched straight to Dave's office. Oh yeah, it was great. Had his car repossessed and everything. Oh hey, Blitz. Yep. For the last freaking time, it's Blair. Blair, not Blitzen, not Blaziken, not Blakely. Blair. Dave furrowed his brow, mouth slightly agape. Yeah, Jim, I'll have to get back to you. He ended the call and furiously pocketed his phone. Do you even know who that was? I mean, why the hell do you think you can just storm into my office like this? No, you listen to me, Davy boy. I just had the worst night of my life. Every weird thing that could have happened, and you don't care one bit. I see you've become acquainted with our more troublesome clientele. Yeah, I have, and I'm not dealing with that crap again. I quit. I hissed dramatically, slapping my hat onto his polished cedarwood desk before turning to walk out the door. Wait, 25 an hour. I stopped dead in my tracks. I reluctantly faced him. A sly, toothy grin was stamped on his greasy face. I mulled it over. That was almost double what I was currently making. I could have my college paid for in no time. 27 and you've got a deal. You drive a hard bargain, miss. Blair. I accept, he said, extending his hand. I begrudgingly shook it, cringing as his sweaty palm gripped mine. I'm glad you were able to see reason. Welcome to the night crew.
I was on the run. I don't want to say why, because I don't want to incriminate myself. Though if anyone from the authorities does read this, I could most likely enter a plea of mental disorder. No sane person would surely claim to have experienced what I did. I had been sleeping rough down by the docks, which was not as bad as it sounds. I had found a sheltered place, a covered lock-up bay for bicycles that no one seemed to use. I had a good sleeping bag and a sad face that worked wonders for getting change from passing strangers. All good, until I noticed I was being eyeballed by the occupants of a passing patrol car. Easy come, easy go, I thought, putting my hands in my pockets and walking away as nonchalantly as I could from my spot. I did not want to take any chances, so it was time to move on. One of the few things I can say with any certainty about my deadbeat life is that I have usually gone with the flow. The other kids were stealing cars, so I did the same. There was easy money moving drugs around on behalf of the local dealer, so that became my thing. When matters escalated, when the thing I don't want to talk about happened, I was part of a crew, bad people that I fell in with, going with the flow. I rounded a corner and a cruise ship came into view. It looked like it had seen better days, I thought, then noticed there was a walkway from the side of the docks attached to the ship, and no one in sight. The flow took me up the walkway and onto the ship. Everywhere I looked, I saw cracked paint and stains and cobweb after cobweb. Faded bunting hung limply from railings and water pooled in gaps in the decking. I could not see anyone paying to take a cruise on this ship. For my part, I've never felt guilty about taking a free ride in my life, and the only destination I cared about was away from here. I had still seen no crew, but did not want to push my luck, so I hunted around for the nearest place to hide. A loose cover over a lifeboat later, and I was snuggled up in the dark, and just in time, as I could hear shouting, boot clattering. The flurry of noise passed. I chanced to look out from the lifeboat and saw a dozen or so wooden crates being manhandled up the walkway. I was starting to think this was a cargo vessel rather than a cruise liner. Maybe once, 20 or more years ago, it had welcomed on board passengers for voyages of pampered luxury. Surely not now, though. Then I heard new voices, men talking animatedly and sounding like they were heading my way. I ducked back under cover and waited. Soon after, I felt the ship rattle beneath me, felt as much as heard it creaking and groaning, and then with a worrying lurch, it started moving. I started to relax. I had left one lot of troubles behind, and the future was unwritten. It was not long, though, before my bladder ruined my sense of calm. I was bursting, but did not want to go in the lifeboat, as I had no idea how long I would need to hide out there. So, real cautious, real slow, I emerged onto the deck. I seemed to be alone. Relieved, I relieved myself. The deck on this part of the ship was empty apart from my lifeboat and a row of sun loungers. It had turned into a hot day, and I would have loved to have settled into one, but dared not risk it. My business finished, I climbed back under the covers and got as comfortable as I could. At some point, I fell asleep. After stretching my aching limbs in the confined space of my new home and yawning, I lifted the cover a little to see if the coast was clear, so I could head out and try and find something to eat and drink. It was fine, and I was soon back on deck, still alone. The only passenger, it seemed to me. A bit further down the deck, the doors to what I assumed were cabins remained closed, and it looked like the shutters on the small windows of each were down. My theory that this was now a cargo ship rather than a passenger vessel appeared more and more likely. This was reinforced when, an hour or so later, we approached a new harbor. I had no idea where we were, but the dock we pulled into was even more run down than the ship. Crouching low and glancing constantly around, I watched as more boxes were loaded. These boxes seemed to rattle and were dotted with what I thought could be air holes. Livestock containers, I assumed. Some poor beasts being transported under conditions which must have been illegal. I decided to go in search of food and something to wash it down with while I hoped the crew were fully occupied loading their new cargo. I got lucky, finding an unlocked storeroom with tins of corned meat and wonders of wonders, a crate of beer. I took less than I wanted, as I did not want to make it too obvious there was a thief on board, and scurried back to the lifeboat. Filling my belly with salty, rubbery meat washed down with warm beer, it started to feel like a home from home. Until the cries began. At first, I thought it was just the ship creaking, its old metal and wood protesting, but soon it became horribly clear they were the cries of living creatures. The livestock, it must have been. They almost sounded human. It was horrible. I wiped my face, feeling suddenly hot. Whether it was the hideous sounds or the warm beer and cold meat, my stomach lurched. I hurried back out onto the deck and leant over the side of the ship, where I was violently sick. I stood there, gasping and shivering. Night was falling, and I watched the last of the light slip away, thankful that the only sounds I could hear now were that of the ship and the water lapping at its hull. And then a click. I turned, saw it was one of the cabin doors opening. I swore to myself. There was no time to get back into the lifeboat, so I ducked under its prow and made myself as small as possible. A man emerged from the cabin. He wore a long black coat and moved with a slow, easy grace. He walked with a silver-handled cane, though for show rather than any need of it, I believed. Under the light of the stars and a quarter moon, his skin appeared pale. His head was shaven, with the intermingling lines of a tattoo reaching up one side of his face. The sight of him made me shiver, and I tried to retreat further back under the lifeboat. As he began to promenade along the deck, more cabin doors opened and more figures stepped out. There were about a dozen that I could see. Each was draped in black. Their pale countenances were expressionless. Some appeared to be male, some female. All their heads were shaved. A variety of intricate facial tattoos seemed to be the only distinguishing marks. Not a word was said between them as they took in the night air. I watched entranced and unsettled in equal measure. There was something otherworldly about the passengers, something which set my nerves on edge. I would have fled if I could, but as it was, I had no choice but to cower in my hiding place and hope that none of them would spot me, even though their stroll along the decks was now taking them right past me. A new figure appeared. He was dressed in a white uniform and carried a tray holding narrow, ornate glasses filled to the brim with a dark liquid. A companion followed in his wake. Together they began to move among the passengers, offering drinks which were eagerly taken. For all their strange appearance, the passengers had up to that point shown a degree of finesse. That seemed to be cast aside as they greedily swallowed down their drinks in one, then proceeded to lick the glasses with long, slim tongues that flickered out of lips stained dark red with the liquid. The passenger closest to me smiled, a tight, controlled movement. I felt sick when I saw his teeth, saw sharp, bestial tips. I closed my eyes. Like a child hiding from something that should have remained within its imagination, I could not see any more without losing control. Hours later, a morning that I thought would never come crept into the sky, and the deck was once more deserted. The passengers had returned to their cabins. I stayed in my hiding place and before long saw the crew carrying objects bundled inside tarpaulin onto deck. One by one, they tossed their loads into the sea. It was the carcasses of the livestock, I thought, then glimpsed a hand in a gap in the tarpaulin shroud as it struck the gray ocean. A human hand. 10 loads in all were discarded. 10 bodies. They floated on the surface for a moment before slipping into the depths. There was no blood pooling on the surface, no sign of life. I thought of a creature that had also traveled by ship from its ancient home to English shores, of legends and myths. I thought of the cries I had heard, and cold fear passed through my body as the truth dawned on me. I thought of sly smiles and crimson-stained lips and razor-sharp teeth, of the hell which awaited me on this ship when night once more fell. I crouched there and wept. The sun was high overhead when my chance presented itself. We were once more approaching a dock. I saw crates lined up, waiting to be brought on board. Imagined glasses brimming, ready for the passengers to drink their fill. I took my chance and clambered up onto the side of the ship, then plummeted into the water. I made it. I'm sitting on a beach now, sipping a cold drink. It is a beautiful day, but I know now that there are creatures out there that care nothing for the day, that wait for the sun to dip below the horizon. I know now that when night falls, fear returns.